Hey, welcome to the Iceberg Lounge, which is now heard in 8 countries around the world. I'm your host, Thomas Single, and on today's show we will be discussing chemtrails and what they are exactly, the history of them, and look at some examples and evidence for and against them. The definition of chemtrails are long-lasting condensation trails of chemicals left in the sky that are not disclosed to the public. People who believe in this theory think that the purpose of chemtrails may be solar radiation management, weather modification, psychological manipulation, human population control, or biological or chemical warfare. Some also say this is causing respiratory illnesses and other health problems. The notion of chemtrails began in 1996 when the United States Air Force published a report about weather modification. Theories came from the internet. Some people talking about this were Richard Fink and William Thomas. They were some of the theorists that were popularized by late-night host Art Bell in 1999. In 2000, there was a multi-agency response to get rid of the rumors. The agencies involved were the Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Aviation Administration, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The EPA would redo its posting in 2015. In the early 2000s, the United States Air Force released a fact sheet that said the theories were a hoax that was made from citations to a strategy paper in 1996 from their Air University. This paper was called Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. This was a military directive to outline a strategy for a weather modification system to keep the U.S. dominant in 2025, which the paper was a response to. In 2005, the United States Air Force had 2 quotes to clarify things about the paper. One, they said it, quote, does not reflect current military policy, practice, or capability. And 2, it's, quote, not conducting any weather modification experiments or programs that has no plans to do so in the future. One other statement the United States Air Force wanted to say was that the, quote, chemtrail hoax has been investigated and refuted by many established and accredited universities, scientific organizations, and major media publications. Within mainstream media, chemtrails are not covered to a big extent, but in 2013, when it was made public that the CIA, NASA, and the organization known as NOAA wanted to provide funds to the National Academy of Science to research ways to counteract global warming by the way of geoengineering. It was said by the International Business Times that, quote, the idea of any government agency looking at ways to control or manipulate the weather will be met with scrutiny and fears of a malign conspiracy. Before we dive into evidence, let's hear a word from our sponsor. Hey, this is Thomas Single from the Iceberg Lounge, and I'm here to talk to you today about Anchor, the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place, and guess what? It's absolutely free, which you can use right from your cell phone or computer just like I do. They even have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds amazing. They'll even distribute your podcast for you. You don't even have to do it yourself. so it can be heard everywhere from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can even make money from your podcast with minimum listenership. So why don't you download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And we're back. So chemtrails differ from contrails because of the longevity of the trails, which them in turn turn into cirrus-like clouds. This longevity would be seen after 1995. But there's evidence of long-lasting contrails before 1995, which was shown in World War II era photos. Some other evidence is visible color spectra seen in the streams along with unusual tracks in a single place, and people seeing unmarked or military planes at weird altitudes or locales. There have been photos of barrels attached to aircraft for flight testing, but the purpose of these is to simulate the weight of people or cargo. Within the barrels are filled with water. The water can be released from barrel to test centers of gravity while in flight. A journalist named Jim Mars cited a Louisiana TV station report from 2007 as evidence of chemtrails. Within the report, the air underneath the crosshatch of, quote, chemtrails was found unsafe levels of barium at 6.8 per million, which would be 3 times more than the U.S. recommendation. An analysis of the footage, though, showed that the equipment was misused, and the levels were blown out of proportion by a factor of 100, with the level of barium found was safe and usual. This still shows the act of using barium, which makes me actually a little unsettled. Other chemicals said to be found in chemtrails are aluminum salts, polymer fibers, thorium, and silicon carbide. In May 2014, a viral video showed an airplane landing on a foggy night. It was described as emitting these chemtrails. As Discovery News would point out, the, quote, chemical emissions was actually normal air disruptions caused by the wings, which were able to be seen due to the fog. In 2001, U.S. Congressman Dennis Kucinich introduced H.R. 2977, otherwise known as the Space Preservation Act of 2001. This prohibited weapons in space. It also listed chemtrails as an exotic weapon, which would be banned. Other things found in the act were extraterrestrial weapons, environmental, climate, and tectonic weapons. This act would eventually die in committee, but those who believe in chemtrails would point to this as admission of chemtrails being true. Let's talk about what contrails are. Contrails are streaks of condensed water vapor created in the air by an airplane or rocket at high altitude. Fossil fuel combustion, however, is made of carbon dioxide and water vapor. Contrails dissipation depends on the weather. At saturation, the contrail may exist for some time, but if dry, it will dissipate quickly. Atmospheric phenomena experts say that the characteristics of chemtrails are just contrails reacting to things like sunlight, temperature, wind chill, humidity level, and altitude. When it comes to the grid-like pattern, it just comes to the flight lanes the planes travel. In 2016, there was a survey of 77 atmospheric scientists. 76 out of 77, or 98.7%, said there was no evidence of a SLAP, otherwise known as a Secret Large-Scale Atmospheric Program. Also, they said that evidence could be explained by other things. So here's some questions. What do y'all think about chemtrails? I would like to hear y'all's opinions. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Iceberg Lounge. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this podcast. Thanks to our sponsor Anchor and our Patreon VIPs who show support. If you want to become a VIP, go to patreon.com/TRJI, and for only $1 a month, you can become a VIP of the Iceberg Lounge. If you want more info about sources in this episode or my social media, it will all be in the information section of this episode. Thanks again, and remember, I love you, and all to God.